when you're at a movie and you're in a scene like Titanic or whatever and you want to cry, do you?
Right.
Or do you avoid it?
Do you hold it back?
Or do you bring your partner closer because you're anxious or whatever?
It's the subconscious driver of all of your behaviors. It's what is driving you. And so it controls you. And on top of that, whatever meaning you assign through which you experience this world. Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today we have episode number 60. It is, drum roll please. That was an excellent drum roll.
Thank you.
How does your attachment style control you? So we did an episode. Do you remember the title and or episode number?
I want to say it was 49.
46 or 49. We will actually look it up. Emilia's going to look it up right now as we go. But we had a Relationship Talks virtual event that was about attachment styles. And we actually have a digital asset in the show notes that you can click on and download for free on Google Drive to follow along with us on this episode. If you're driving, please do not do that. But we did a Relationship Talks virtual event podcast review after it, and we did. Do you know that?
Episode 49, I was right.
Okay,
yep.
Episode 49. Excellent work.
What is your attachment style was the episode title.
Okay, so if you have not yet listened to that episode, we apologize for the inconvenience. Go to that episode first, because that episode is about, first and foremost, figuring out what your attachment style is. Assuming you've listened to that episode, now this episode is going to be about how that attachment style is affecting you, controlling you, governing your behavior. As always, we would like to give a huge shout out to Next Level Podcast Solutions. Thank you so much for producing this show and so many others all over the world. Thank you for making this world a better place. We appreciate you and LPS team. As always, sweetheart, what is your intention for today's episode?
You actually really just stated my intention. So I'll just reiterate it. My intention is for our listeners who have listened to episode number 49, really help them build on the deeper understanding of how your attachment style, now that you've confirmed it and you're certain, and if you aren't, go to the digital asset that's in the show notes of this podcast to really understand how it governs your behavior. And to this episode title, how does it control you? So often we walk around life not understanding why we might not be getting the outcome that we really want. And this is one of the biggest reasons why, because we're kind of asleep when it comes to the wheel of how our attachment styles governs and controls our behaviors.
The best way for you to improve your relationship is to understand yourself, get to know yourself, get to know your partner. So that's what we're going to do here. All right. So our little dog, Tucker. Yeah, the cutest dog. Such a sweet boy. So he's a Pomchi.
Imagine
a husky that's like little.
Itty bitty
husky.
8 pounds.
Perfect.
Give or take.
Little Pomchi. And imagine a little husky. Every single morning, so I'll just use this morning as an example. So every single morning, I usually am up before Emilia and I'll work in my little section, my little spot near the fireplace. Awesome. And eventually it gets to the point where it's like, okay, I got to take Tucker and Tariel out. And so I go upstairs and Tariel has her little kitten crate in Emilia's office. Tucker has his crate in my office. And so I split time. First I take a right and then I see Tariel. She gives me a little bit of love and then she's off to the races. She is what we call a secure attachment style. She's like, Dad, I love you. Thanks for letting me out of my crate, but I'm going to go get food now. And like, I'll rub up on you a little bit in terms of, I want some love. I want love, but I don't need it.
Yeah.
which makes me feel really special. I'm joking. All right. So then I go in to get Tucker, and Tucker is what we would call an anxious attachment style, which Tucker, I also have a little bit of that in me too. So shout out to me and Tucker. But he cannot and does not care about anything else whatsoever until he first finds his mom. And there's a lot of roots as to why that is. Tucker was not well treated as a puppy and XYZ. We're not going to go into that. But what we will say is that basically until Tucker sees that mom's in the house and that and sees mom, and we call it a Tucker bomb. Essentially what he does is he jumps up onto the bed and then full Superman dogs into Emilia's face, which is actually quite entertaining, believe it or not.
It's always cute. And then what happens right after that?
Tucker scarf.
Usually a sneeze.
Oh, yeah.
Right
First,
in my face.
A couple sneezes in your face, and then he does a Tucker scarf, which is essentially laying on your neck to the point where you're basically suffocating and you're too hot. In the summer, it's actually quite difficult to get any sleep around here. But anyways, so here's my point. Tariel immediately gets a little bit of love from her dad, and then she immediately goes to food or play or whatever. She doesn't really care that much about mom yet. But she's just doing her thing. Tucker can't move forward until he knows mom is there. And then after he sees his mom for a little while and does a little Tucker bomb, then he cares about his dad, which, makes me feel second best. Yeah, it's not easy for my attachment style. So that triggers me. Then I do a Tucker bomb. No, I'm kidding.
And then I have Tucker
and then
wrapped around my neck.
Which triggers Emilia's avoidant attachment style. So I have to call her because she's on her way out. I'm joking. No, all of that was a joke except for the Tucker and Tariel thing. So the point here is there are, for those listening, what are the 4 attachment styles?
So in the digital asset that we're going to have linked in the show notes, we have, so primarily we categorize them as secure and insecure. So there's 2 different categorizations, 4 total that will be in this digital asset. The first one, which is the first categorization, is secure. So Tariel in this instance is a secure attachment style. The other 3 are in that category, the second category, which is called insecure attachment styles. So you can have either avoidant attachment style, you can have insecure,
anxious,
or anxious, otherwise known as anxious.
Yep.
And there's different kind of names to this, but this is in the digital asset, it'll be shown as disorganized, or you could say fearful, anxious.
Fearful, anxious, anxious, insecure, or anxious avoidant, meaning you flip-flop between the 2 extremes.
Flippity-flop. So in the two categories, first category is secure. The second is insecure. And within that insecure are 3 different types of attachment styles. So you'll see that on the digital asset. I highly encourage you guys to pull that up so that you can really visualize what we're looking at. But typically...
Do you remember the percentages?
Oh, yeah.
Just high level? Okay.
I don't.
We don't have to go into them right now. We did that in the other episode, I'm almost certain. We definitely did in the Relationship Talks event. Okay, she just pulled it up.
Yeah.
All right, so avoidant is 25% of the population. Secure is 56% of the population. Anxious is 19% of the population. Shout out to the anxious. And then fearful, avoidant, the disorganized, there is no percentage.
Right. Because essentially it makes up the 25 and the 19%.
Got it. So it makes up the other 2 percentages. Yeah. Okay. So again, we didn't want to go too deep into the data, but there's no shame in whichever one you are. Everyone has an attachment style. And I think that in some ways, when we're triggered, we all go into some sort of an insecure attachment style. And is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I was actually reading a book earlier today that was talking about the Gumby. And do you remember the Gumby? It's like this rubber little character. It's like a green Gumby character.
I remember Gumby.
Where like it's if you stretch it, right? Like it'll eventually always go back to its
Gumby had
form.
a dog, right?
I don't know.
When he was, okay.
I just remember like chewing on this Gumby when I was little. It was like a green little, like it wasn't gendered, but it was just like this like stick figure human that was stretchy and rubbery. It was like a little toy growing up.
I think Gumby was before your time. For the other millennials out there, which you're a millennial, but on the tail end of it, you're near the Gen Z because you're so young. I'm joking. But I think Gumby was before your time. That was back in the Hey Arnold.
I didn't know what it was really.
Hey Arnold, Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, all these kinds of cartoon characters, Nickelodeon all over. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the 7-year difference right there.
Right. So why I mentioned that is because in essence, to your comment that you had just said, we all kind of get stretched and pulled throughout life and throughout different parts of our day. And this is stretching and pulling us away from what our typical Gumby form is. And per this analogy, we get stretched throughout the day outside of or into a different attachment style, but our homeostasis where we live is that Gumby form. We'll always go back to that Gumby form. So with a Tucker, his anxious attachment style, his Gumby form, if you will, always the go-to is anxious. And that's because of his upbringing. And I want to clarify something that you said, his mistreatment before my ownership.
Oh,
so I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't,
of course.
Yeah. So anyways, with that,
I think that's probably implied that,
but I want to make sure.
Of course. Yeah.
So to that extent, his Gumby form is always going to go back to the anxious attachment, but here's what's really cool about attachment styles. You can move them into more of a secure attachment style with a ton of TLC. And we were just talking before this episode, though Tucker has been formed to be an anxious attachment, you're actually doing a really beautiful job at helping him shift more towards that secure attachment by helping him provide that safety that mom and dad aren't going anywhere. And, you know, even though he might be running this pattern through his like, oh my God, if I'm not able to see mom, I can't drink, I can't poop, I can't pee, I can't, you know, like I can't do anything.
Survive.
Right.
And that's where this comes from originally. And again, we talked about that on the other episode.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing with Tucker is this morning I opened the bedroom door, let him see that you're there, kept him, and then said, Mommy's sleeping now. And then I went back to work and he was okay for a little while. And then I think after that, he tried to scratch the door or whatever when I went to the bathroom. But the point is that we're making progress. And if Tucker can do it, you can too. And I guess as we kind of wrap up here, because we have 4 minutes on the clock, what is the story that you wanted to share about your avoidant attachment style? Because I think we've talked a lot about the anxious attachment style, and I think a lot of people kind of understand how to start evolving that by becoming more secure. What about avoidant?
Yeah. So, and to clarify, the Tucker is the anxious, Tariel is the secure. Tariel wants love, but she doesn't really need it to the extent that Tucker does.
Bonnie here. I just wanted to share my experience with group coaching and some of the things that I got out of it. So going into group coaching, I was not tracking any habits at all. And I had sort of jumped on board habit tracking here and there, knowing it was a good idea, but not sort of ever succeeding with it. And so now some of them have become habits. I'm happy to say I wake up, I have a glass of water without even thinking about it anymore. So now I think it's probably time to gear up and like increase my water intake or change the water one a little bit, something like that. And so I highly encourage people to jump into group coaching. There's so much information that you will get out of it. I recommend bringing a notebook to all of the sessions and taking lots of notes, asking lots of questions, and rewatching the videos, because it is the video coaching part is just packed with information. I also really recommend that you check in with your accountability buddy and sort of lift each other up throughout the experience, because there's lots of momentum, it's really exciting, and then it gets hard. And so stick with it and carry on, and your life will be better for it. Okay, take care.
So on the other spectrum of things, I grew up developing a very avoidant attachment styles. For me, what I came to understand and feel and interpret as a kid was that it wasn't safe in our family to experience emotions. It wasn't safe. It wasn't encouraged to really talk about and express your emotions. I really only did that in a therapy setting. And so as a result, I learned that vulnerability is really a bad place to be. It's not
And
safe.
by the way, when she says it's not safe, she doesn't mean physically unsafe.
No, definitely not.
She means psychological safety with being vulnerable. Vulnerability wasn't super modeled.
Yes.
And that's
definitely
what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So earlier today, I had a really interesting experience where my mom had sent a song pretty much that was like, have you guys listened to this? And I'm like, no, would you send me the link? She sends me back you can look it up on YouTube. And immediately I had this reaction of like, you're right. thank you for having boundaries. Thank you for respecting yourself. And thank you for not enabling me. You're right. I can look this thing up on YouTube. I look up the song, and it's a song that talks about like really like how when it's more of like a tribute of like a kid to their mom and to their dad saying, I know you did everything you can. I still want to experience like all of this life. And if this was our last moment, thank you for everything that you've done. And it was kind of like in listening to that, what I experienced really emotionally was like, I started to be like, oh, like I started crying. And this is like middle of my work day. So I'm like starting to like cry and tear up. And this
5 minutes before a meeting.
Literally, it was like 5 minutes before a meeting. Yeah. So it was like I was in the pressure cooker of like going into a meeting. You're not supposed to show up with a ton of tears down your face and
Ugly
looking
cry.
like a mess, right? Yeah. So I'm already under that pressure. And then I also had this dynamic of in the family group chat, like, we don't really like exchange photos and talk about crying and sadness and when we experience those moments of like grief, because in a lot of ways I had that moment of like, oh my God, my parents won't be here one day. And I think we all have that. We all have that moment where like, oh my God, whether you're in a tumultuous relationship with your parents, you've gone through it, and I've gone through the ups and downs of my parents for sure. And now I'm in the interdependent state, which is a whole nother topic. But I had that moment where there was a part of me that felt icky that I was having this emotional experience, that like, it was like, don't share this with them.
AKA avoid this.
AKA avoid the emotional experience, avoid the crying, toughen up, like put on a shield, put on a face, like pretend as if this doesn't affect you. When in reality, I'm over here at my desk, like bawling my eyes out, like it was hard to breathe. And as a learned avoidant attachment style, I felt literally physiologically unsafe. And though there was nothing, no threat to my survival whatsoever, I was so afraid that I would be looked at as weak or whatever. And I literally like had this moment of, I would rather connect in this moment emotionally with my mom, who has that bravery to get into the emotional depths of what this moment means for us. And as a result, I took a photo of myself crying, inspired by Alan and something that he did recently. But I sent this photo to her and just said, thanks so much for that. That was really beautiful, or something like that, where it was a live photo. So if she were to click down, she'd actually see the tears rolling down my face. And I sent her a little blowing kissy, and we were able to connect on that, where that was a very secure attachment. I'm secure, even though I'm having all these experiences. I can be secure in who I am and what I want to stand for. I don't want my mom in this instance, once she passes and once my dad passes, to me, then finally have these emotional sadness of grief and loss and all that stuff.
And show them how much you care.
Right.
After the fact.
Right. Because they can't actually experience how much I care. And so it's like, I know a lot of people want to shield themselves from having an emotional experience. And I learned to do that too on many of my own regards. And I want to break that cycle. So there was that little moment for me today where I wanted to break that cycle, and I did. And I'm grateful that I did, because we were able to share in that. And I ended up showing up to that meeting, and no one ended up showing up. So I was, it actually ended up getting canceled, but it was I was proud. I was proud to have that moment. And I want to bring this to all of our listeners to really show how what was at one point, like I struggled to cry, struggled to experience any sort of emotions. I was so avoidant. But now through this work that Alan and I have been doing, that we want to encourage all of you as our listeners to do, you can not be controlled by your attachment style anymore. You can shift from an avoidant or an insecure, fearful avoidant or whatever into the secure by doing this conscious work. And so to answer that question, to bring this really full circle, how does your attachment style control you? It's really the subconscious driver. I have written here on my Remarkable. It's the subconscious driver of all of your behaviors. It's what is driving you. And so it controls you. And on top of that, whatever meaning you assign through which you experience this world. So I could have experienced the same exact thing where I received this text. And if I let my avoidant attachment style drive, I could have been like, she wants to connect, and like made fun of that. And like, I could have assigned the meaning that like, oh, that was a cheesy moment, instead of actually saying, wow, that was a really beautiful bid for connection. That was a really beautiful, I'm sure she's experiencing this in a way that she's trying to connect with us all on. while we're alive together. That's extremely powerful. That's extremely deep. And I assigned a different meaning because I shifted from that avoidant attachment style, which is my quote unquote Gumby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And replace this with the Gumby that I'm aspiring to evolve into, which is that secure. So it's deepen my ability to experience life, to experience my emotional depth with the people that are living that I deeply care and love. And so I hope for all of our listeners, regardless of if you're in the secure bucket, you rock, that's awesome. That's so cool. But if you're not, I think that people are so afraid of having this attachment style run you. And I think that that's a good fear, because I think that we all have the ability to shift into secure.
So we're going to unpack this at some point, but babe, from the IFS lens, internal family systems, we all have all of the attachment styles.
Yes.
And different parts of us. IFS we're going to do another time, but I do want everyone to understand that when you said if you are in the secure bucket, no one's fully in the secure bucket.
No one's fully.
They have
100%.
a part they identify with
Yeah.
that's mostly in the secure bucket, but when they're triggered, there's a part that's anxious and there's probably a part that's avoidant.
Yeah.
And so when you're crying, when you're at a movie and you're in a scene like Titanic or whatever and you want to cry, do you?
Right.
Or do you avoid it?
Do you hold it back?
Or do you bring your partner closer because you're anxious
Yeah.
or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so identify what your attachment style is. And the last thing that I want to bring to the table here is this. Tucker is an anxious attachment style, but he isn't a human who can identify that he is an anxious attachment style.
Right.
So our parenting has to be there to help him overcome and transform his attachment style into a more secure attachment style.
Right.
Us as humans, we can observe ourselves and our own behavior, and then we can decide to shift.
So powerful.
Whereas Tucker can't necessarily do that, at least not as consciously, because we have the prefrontal cortex. So thank you all for listening. We really, thank you, love. You as well. You did an excellent job on this episode. The questions I have written down: what is your primary attachment style? What is it? What's your partner's primary attachment style? And most importantly, what are the implications of that? And are they getting on each other, for lack of better phrasing?
Do you want that Gumby to control you? Do you like the way in which you're showing up to really deep moments of your life? For me, it was hell no, because I couldn't connect with you in movies. I couldn't connect and feel the depths. Alan would cry in movies, and I'd be like,
Well, I remember one time I told her, I said, sweetheart, this is why I watch movies. I want to be inspired. I want it to touch my heart, not just my head, my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she'd be like making a joke or like going to get something to eat. I'm like, babe, this is the scene.
Yeah,
This
that was
is
so
it.
foreign, because I modeled I didn't model. I was modeled the like very much making a joke of that. That was how my upbringing was. And now I realize it's because of their discomfort with the ability to experience emotion, because they didn't have that modeled. So a lot of this is epigenetic. This is family toxic cycles that are inherited. And I was bringing that into my relationship and I didn't even realize it. And you were so beautiful in that moment of like, can you not make a joke? And it was like, what do you mean? That's what we do here with these things. This is uncomfortable. We're not supposed to cry, right? Crying equals weak equals all these things, not safe. That's not true.
Not true.
And I believe that attachment styles do not need to control us. Again, if we want an outcome of a really beautiful, loving partnership, so much of that is driven by our attachment styles. And if you don't have that, then I think this is a really great episode to really prompt, okay, what attachment style are you? How is it controlling your behaviors? When you're in the pressure cooker, i.e., when you're getting Gumby's getting stretched, how are you coming back to that Gumby? And do you want to evolve that? And I think that can be a really powerful thing, as I know it has been for our relationship. And I'm grateful for that.
Sweetheart. Me as well. So, and if you think about it too, by the way, someone who is truly secure can cry.
Oh yeah.
If you're truly secure, you can cry in front of others. So it's not proof of weakness, it's actually proof of security. Strength,
and
bravery, security, vulnerability, right? So we have to transform that in our culture, but we have to start with ourselves. Okay, so we got to jump because we are way over time here. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, we have a Relationship Talks virtual event. This is our 22nd event. It's on April 13th. The link to register will be in the show notes. It is how to have a drama-free relationship. What our clients and listeners want most is to stop fighting.
Yeah.
All of our episodes, to some extent, is how do you understand yourself and your partner at a deeper level so that you can get along, so that you can be on the same team, aka so that you can stop fighting. who doesn't want a drama-free relationship? If you feel like you keep fighting or bickering over little things, if you feel like you don't understand what's happening, you're growing apart, not together, this event is for you. I can promise you, you're going to leave it with more certainty, at least that you can weather the storm together and that now you know what to do. So come join us, click the link in the show notes, register, and we cannot wait to see you there. Last thing I'll say is you do not have to have your camera on. You do not have to have your microphone on. You can just listen in live if you want to. These are not recorded. You can contribute in the chat, or you can contribute on your microphone, or you can contribute on your camera. Contribute as much or as little as you'd like, and we cannot wait to meet you.
Yeah, it's awesome. We had a couple people in our last event that were actually in the car and just literally camera, mic off, listen the entire time.
And their kid listened
and
too.
their kid listened, and it was so impactful. And if you listen to a couple of our past episodes, we did another review on that and shared the testimonial. It was so powerful for them and really helped inspire their goals and all that. So we hope to see you at that event. In addition to that, we are continuing our service Saturdays, which for Alan and I, it's actually one of my favorite parts of the day on Saturday, and why Saturday looks the way that it does. But what we do is every single Saturday, we make sure that we allocate 30 minutes on our calendar, i.e. have that space, our virtual door open to anyone within the community that wants to take advantage of that. And it's Alan and I sitting down, typically on this couch or somewhere out in the wilderness. No, I'm kidding. But it's for you. And if you and your partner just are not on the same page, or maybe you guys are struggling, whether it's in this or in anything else that we've talked about, this is a completely private and free virtual space where you can really connect with Alan and I, and we can really share, what are some of the things that could help you guys. And when we were growing up, we didn't really have that safe space. So Alan and I aspire to really provide that safe space where you and your partner can get on the same page. If it's just you, that's awesome. We've had that too, and really connect with our listeners. So we would love to meet you. It's completely private, like I said, free, virtual. So you can show up with your mug, your slippers, and you can literally just be yourself, which I think is important. So that link also is in the show notes. We would love to meet you.
And as always, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. Do not miss the next episode, number 61. And as always, it is not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.